The rain was soft that afternoon, barely misting the windshield as Nyla sat at the red light. Her wipers swiped twice, then paused. She wasn't rushing. She had time. That's when she saw him. Kalen stood across the street, right in front of a sleek glass building downtown. His hands were tucked casually in his coat pockets. His smile. It wasn't for her. The building door swung open. Out walked a woman, mid-30s, pregnant, visibly so. She moved gently but confidently, like she knew someone was waiting for her. Her hand lifted, waving at the man Nyla called her husband. And Kalen, he didn't hesitate. He waved back, not out of surprise, not with confusion, but with recognition. Warm, familiar. The light turned green, but Nyla didn't move. She watched him smile, and for the first time in 3 years of marriage, she realized something. He hadn't been hers for a long time. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories. If you've ever had that one moment where everything you feared suddenly made sense, this story is for you. If you've ever felt your heart clench while your hands stayed still, if you've ever whispered, "Don't be what I think it is," then watched it unfold anyway, stick around. Because Nyla didn't scream. She didn't cry in public. She didn't throw anything. She just drove. But later that night, when she asked one quiet question, Kalen gave her one answer too honest to undo. And by the time morning came, she was gone. Before we begin, if you believe peace is stronger than revenge, hit that like button. If you've ever walked away without slamming the door, if you believe silence can be the loudest goodbye, tap subscribe, because this story is yours too. Let's begin. Before the secrets, before the silence, there was music, soft lights, and late-night laughter from the kitchen. Nyla remembered it so clearly. She hadn't planned on meeting anyone that night. She was just grabbing coffee after a long shift. The corner cafe was nearly empty, a quiet jazz playlist humming through its speakers. She stood near the pastry case, scanning options she didn't intend to buy, when she heard a voice behind her. Cinnamon rolls the safest choice. Everything else is a gamble after 6. She turned, amused. The man had a sharp jawline, relaxed posture, and eyes that held more focus than flirtation. "I was just looking," she replied. "So was I," he said, nodding once. Toward her, not the food. His name was Kalen, and from that night forward, he kept showing up. For coffee, for dinner, for the smallest excuses. He helped her with a flat tire one morning, then offered her a ride even after she declined. He texted without pressure, called without agenda, and when she laughed, he paused to really listen. It felt easy, not rushed, not performative, just good. They dated for a year before marriage came up. Kalen was already building his tech firm then, working long hours but always carving out time for her. He brought takeout to her apartment late at night, helped her organize her consulting paperwork when she left her job to freelance. He said he admired her independence. He never once asked her to change. When he proposed, it wasn't with flash or spectacle, just a quiet question in their favorite park at sunset. "I want to build something that lasts, Nyla. I want to build it with you." She said yes before he finished the sentence. Their first year of marriage felt like a gentle rhythm. They spent Saturdays at farmers' markets, Sundays in bed, laughing about nothing. She learned how to code switch between his boardroom pace and their couch pace. He started using words like ours and us in investor meetings when discussing his future. They were grounded, deeply in tune. They didn't go out much, but when they did, it was always deliberate. A rooftop dinner here, a hotel weekend there. They made memories out of simplicity, falling asleep watching documentaries, sharing one. Pair of earbuds on long walks, exchanging foot massages at the end of tiring days. Kalen wasn't the expressive type, but when he looked at her, she felt seen. He didn't always say "I love you," but he said it in other ways, bringing her favorite mint tea on tough days, holding her silently. When she didn't want to talk, watching her sleep like he needed the reminder she was real. By the second year, the pace changed. Kaylin's company was scaling quickly. 2 of his apps were acquired by a national firm. Media coverage increased. He began flying out more often. First, it was 2 days, then 3, then full weeks. His responses turned shorter. Landed, busy day, talk later, and yet Nyla held on. She chalked it up to business stress. She kept cooking his favorite meals, leaving little reminders in his suitcase. Tiny notes like, "Don't forget your smile," or "Let's dance when you're back." She wanted to be the anchor, not the weight. Still, she started noticing the shift. He stopped asking about her clients. He no longer noticed when she wore her hair differently. His gifts were expensive but impersonal. Jewelry in boxes, not memories in moments. One night, she lit candles. Dressed in the soft satin robe he once couldn't keep his hands off. He came home late, tired, drained. He kissed her forehead, whispered, "Rain check," and walked into the shower. She lay awake that night, wondering who he was becoming, and whether she was still part of it. Her friends asked, "Everything okay? Still doing those cute Saturdays?" She smiled and nodded. "Just busy. We're both building," but deep down she felt it, the distance that doesn't come with miles, but with decisions. One night, while folding laundry, she held up one of his shirts. It was a dark grey button-down, one he never wore around her. She had only seen it on Instagram, at a conference post from a tech reporter. He looked good in it, sharp, confident. But as she pressed it to her nose, her stomach dropped. The scent wasn't cologne. It wasn't floral either. It was faint, clean, something warm and sweet, like a lotion with almond oil and vanilla undertones. Not her scent. She stood there, shirt in hand, for a long time, not crying, not accusing, just processing. She put the shirt away neatly, didn't say a word. That was the thing about Nyla. She didn't explode. She internalized, not because she was weak, but because she always tried to give the benefit of the doubt. She wasn't the type to snoop. She hated games. She wanted to believe that trust meant holding steady, even when the boat rocked. But the waves were getting stronger. Kaylin no longer brought up weekend getaways. He cancelled their anniversary dinner last minute due to a meeting with an investor. She ate alone that night, steak growing cold on the plate while she watched the clock hit midnight. When he came in past 1, she didn't ask. When he kissed her cheek and said, "You're still up?" She nodded but said nothing. She was tired, not from work, but from waiting. Still, there were moments that made her stay. When he held her during thunderstorms, when he played her favorite records without asking, when he reached for her hand in the middle of the night. She kept choosing those small moments, because she believed in what they'd built. But she also knew, love that goes unwatered turns into silence, and that silence was growing louder every day. On a quiet Thursday morning, Nyla stood in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil. She looked around their penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood floors, curated furniture. Kaylin picked himself. Everything looked beautiful, perfect even, except for the air between them. It felt staged, like a showroom life. Her phone buzzed with a calendar alert for a client call. She turned it off without reading the details. The kettle whistled. She poured herself tea, sat at the island, and opened her laptop. But instead of typing, she watched the steam dance above her mug. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind that followed disappointment, the kind that made you wonder if love had moved out quietly, without taking its things. Later that night, Kaylin called to say he'd be home late again. Investor dinner. Shouldn't be long. Okay, Nyla said softly. You good? Yeah. Just tired. He didn't ask tired from what. She hung up and stared at her phone. She never checked his call logs, never snooped through messages. But that night, she scrolled through their old texts. 2 years ago, Kaylin, don't forget our sushi date tonight, love. Wear that black dress. A year ago, Kaylin, thinking about you while sitting through this boring meeting. Now, Kaylin, busy day. We'll eat out. How do two people go from constant connection to radio silence and call it normal? The next morning, Nyla sat on the balcony sipping her second cup of coffee when her consulting app pinged. A new notification. Expense alert, $672.40. 6 cents vendor, Bellevue Executive Suites. Raleigh. She stared at it. Kalen wasn't in Raleigh. He was supposed to be flying to Austin that week. She waited until he came home that night. The moment he dropped his keys on the counter, she asked gently, "Were you in Raleigh?" He paused. "No." "Why?" She turned her phone to him. "Our app flagged this charge." He glanced at the screen for a second too long. "Oh, that's probably a company booking error. I'll have it looked into." She nodded slowly. "Okay." But something inside her cracked. Not because of the charge, because of the way he said it, like he didn't owe her the truth, like she was just someone asking. Days passed. She said nothing more about it, but she started watching more closely. His phone never left his side. He turned it over every time he placed it down. He began showering with the door locked, something he'd never done in 3 years. Still, Nyla didn't confront him. She watched. She listened. She memorized the changes, not out of paranoia, but preparation, because when the truth came, whatever it was, she didn't want to be surprised. One evening, she saw him on a live stream. A local tech summit panel Kalen was invited to speak at. He wore a sleek navy suit, no tie, clean-shaven. His voice was confident as he discussed growth, equity, and leadership. At the end, the moderator asked, "What keeps you grounded outside business?" Kalen smiled. "My wife, Nyla. She's calm when the world isn't. She sees what I miss. She reminds me who I am." Nyla blinked. She should have felt flattered. But instead, she felt hollow, because when the cameras were off, she wasn't his grounding force anymore. She was barely his shadow. The following weekend, Kalen flew out again. Before he left, he kissed her forehead. "I'll call you when I land." She nodded, then watched the elevator doors close. She didn't cry. She opened her planner, wrote down client meetings, checked off tasks. She stayed busy. But inside, her chest ached, not from heartbreak, but from absence. And absence, when it stretches long enough, starts to feel like truth. That Sunday, she ran into her best friend, Ava, while grabbing groceries. "You look tired," Ava said gently. "I am. Work, marriage," Nyla replied before she could filter it. Ava paused. "You want to talk?" Nyla hesitated. "If I say it out loud, I'll have to admit it's real." Ava touched her hand. "Saying it doesn't make it worse. It makes you stronger." They sat on a bench outside the store. Nyla said it. Everything. The late nights, the silence, the feeling of being an extra in her own marriage. Ava didn't interrupt. When Nyla finished, Ava only said, "You don't have to stay quiet to be graceful." That line stayed with her. Back home, she looked around their living room. The photo on the wall, one from their honeymoon in Puerto Rico. They were laughing in it. His arms wrapped around her waist, her head thrown back. She stepped closer, looked at the picture frame. The smile she wore then wasn't the one she wore now. She'd grown used to faking it. 2 nights later, Kalen came back. He brought her a gift. New earrings, still in the bag. She thanked him, then placed them on her dresser unopened. He didn't notice. He sat beside her on the couch and asked about her week. She gave short answers. He nodded, distracted. His phone buzzed. He checked it instantly. That was when she asked, "Are you happy?" He looked up, startled. "What? In our marriage? Are you happy?" Kalen sighed. "Is everything okay, Nyla?" "That's not an answer. I'm tired. Let's not do this tonight." She stood. "That's the problem. There's never a tonight. There's always something more important." He rubbed his eyes. "You're reading into things." She stared at him. "No, Kalen. I'm finally reading them correctly." That night, she didn't sleep beside him. She lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Everything in her chest felt loud, beating, buzzing, warning. Something was coming. She didn't know what, but she knew the version of their love that once existed was gone. Not suddenly, but slowly, like light fading during a long sunset. By the time you notice the dark, it's already night. The morning after that restless night on the couch, Nyla woke before sunrise. The apartment was still. The kind of still that didn't soothe, it suffocated. She sat up slowly, wrapped the blanket tighter, and stared out at the skyline. Charlotte looked peaceful in the early light, but inside her chest, nothing felt calm. She couldn't remember the last time she and Kaylin truly laughed together. Not a polite chuckle, not a tired smirk at a TV show, but a laugh that came from the gut, unguarded, shared. There was a time he could make her laugh without trying. Now even his jokes felt like business meetings, measured, rehearsed, distant. She hadn't signed up for this version of love, the one where comfort meant routine, and routine meant neglect. Kaylin came out of the bedroom around 7. He rubbed his eyes, his voice still hoarse. "Why'd you sleep out here? I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't." She watched him pour coffee. He didn't ask if she wanted any, didn't even glance her way after. He scrolled through his phone while sipping. Silence. Not angry silence. Not even awkward silence. Just detachment. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and gently said, "We need to talk." Kaylin looked up, mildly startled. "About what?" "About us." He hesitated. "Now." "Yes, now." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She spoke like a woman trying to save something, but unsure if it was worth the rescue. "You don't ask about my work anymore. You don't hold my hand when we walk. You don't even say goodnight some days." Kaylin sighed. "I've been under pressure. You know how much is riding on this merger." "I do," she said quietly. "But I'm not the one you're merging with, Kaylin, and I shouldn't feel like the extra column on your balance sheet." He blinked. "That's not fair." "No," she replied. "What's not fair is feeling lonelier in my marriage than I did when I was single." She waited for him to say something, to close the distance, to care. He didn't. He set his cup down and mumbled, "We'll talk tonight. I've got back-to-back meetings." He didn't talk that night. He didn't even come home. A text arrived at 10:44 p.m. Late dinner with partners. "Stay up if you want. Might be late." She stared at the message. No warmth, no apology, not even a full sentence. She didn't reply. She closed the bedroom door, locked it from the inside, and slept with her back to the wall. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of the shower running. He'd returned at some point during the night. She didn't speak to him. He didn't speak to her. And that's how their days started blending. Small silence grew into large gaps. Their dinners grew shorter. Their mornings became nods instead of greetings. Their kisses became quick and hollow. She would speak. He would answer with sighs or shrugs. She would ask how his day went. He'd say, "Long." No details, no stories, no room for her. A week later, she visited her mother in Monroe. They sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea, while the breeze rustled through the magnolia trees. Her mother watched her quietly before asking, "Are you in love, or are you just married?" Nyla didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "I think I'm in something, but I don't think it's love anymore." Her mother reached for her hand. "Love isn't always loud, baby, but it should always feel safe." Nyla nodded, her throat tightening. "I don't feel safe," she said softly. "I feel invisible." That night, she opened her laptop and looked at pictures from their early years. Kaylin smiling over tacos in Asheville, her wearing his hoodie on a snowy balcony, them dancing barefoot in the living room to a jazz record they both loved. And then she looked at the photos from the last year, vacations with no laughter, dinners where they sat across the table but didn't touch, Kaylin always looking at his phone, even in posed photos. The contrast was heartbreaking. She started journaling that week. Each entry began with a question. Is love supposed to ache this quietly? Why does silence from someone you love feel like being erased? Can someone lose you while still sleeping beside you? She didn't have answers. But writing helped her hold the parts of herself Kaylin had stopped noticing. A few days later, she had a moment of softness. He was watching TV, mindlessly flipping channels. She sat beside him, took his hand, and placed it on her lap. He didn't resist. He didn't pull away. But he didn't look at her either. His eyes stayed on the screen. That hurt more than a slap. She stood, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door quietly behind her. She remembered something Ava once said, "If you have to beg someone to see you, you're already gone to them." Nyla wasn't dramatic. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to hurt him. She just wanted to be seen, not admired, not tolerated, seen. She started spending more time at her co-working space, took on more clients, mentored a few young women starting their own firms. She found peace in helping others build what they believed in. There, she felt needed, valued. Every time she walked through her front door after work, she felt the contrast. Her home wasn't warm anymore. It was modern, quiet, polished, but not home. One day, while Kaylin was away again, she found herself lingering near his closet. She wasn't snooping. She just needed to know. The suit she'd folded weeks ago was still there, the one with the unfamiliar scent. She pulled it out again. Same almond and vanilla softness. She stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Whose comfort did you carry on you that day?" No one answered. She hung the suit back and stepped away. That night, she looked at herself in the mirror. Not to criticize, just to remember. She saw a woman with full lips, deep eyes, steady hands, and a softness that hadn't hardened yet. A woman who didn't yell when she hurt. A woman who carried disappointment like it was her fault. A woman trying to stay, for someone who had already left in every way but physically. She turned off the bathroom light and stood by the window. The city buzzed in the distance. Headlights moved like fireflies down the expressway. Somewhere out there, Kaylin was in another hotel, maybe working, maybe not. But she was here, waiting. And suddenly, waiting didn't feel loyal anymore. It felt like betrayal of herself. The next afternoon, Nyla met a new client at a quiet cafe in Midtown. The woman, mid-40s, ran a handmade soap business out of her garage. They talked branding, packaging, digital storefronts. Halfway through the meeting, the woman paused and said, "You've got the calmest energy, like you've seen fire and still carry water." Nyla blinked. That wasn't a business comment. It was personal. She smiled and nodded. "Maybe I have." As they wrapped up, the woman handed her a free sample from her latest line. Sweet almond and vanilla. Nyla froze. She held the soap in her hand, smiled politely, then excused herself and went straight to her car. She didn't cry, she didn't break down, but her body trembled as she placed the bar on the passenger seat, staring at it like it had said something out loud. That scent, it wasn't just a mystery anymore. It had a name. It had a face, and her heart already knew Kaylin's silence was no accident. That night, she didn't wait for Kaylin to come home. She wrote him a short message. "I'm staying at Ava's tonight. We'll talk when I'm ready." Then she packed a weekend bag, called a ride, and left. She didn't take jewelry. Not the watch he gave her. Not the necklace from their first anniversary. She only took what she needed. And peace. That she carried for herself. At Ava's apartment, things were warm. Socks on the floor. Laughter from Ava's roommate in the next room. A candle flickering on the coffee table. Nyla sat on the couch, her knees hugged to her chest. Ava handed her a cup of herbal tea. "You good?" "No," Nyla whispered. "But I'm here. And that counts." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Ava said, "I never liked how he made you smaller." Nyla looked up. "Smaller? You used to light up when you talked about things. Your clients, your goals. Lately, you sound like you're trying to not say too much. Like you're afraid to take up space." That hurt. Because it was true. "I don't know who I became," Nyla admitted. Ava shook her head. "You didn't become anything. You just adjusted to survive." "That's not you. That's him." The next morning, Nyla woke early and went for a walk. She left her phone behind. Charlotte was quiet at that hour, shops unopened, air crisp, sky soft. She walked past their old breakfast spot, the same place where Kylan once tried 10 times to flip a pancake without breaking it. The same place he once said, "You're the calm in all my storms." She remembered laughing, pressing her lips to his and whispering, "You're not in a storm anymore. We're building a house now." But he hadn't stayed in that house. He'd built a hallway, one that led away from her. When she returned to Ava's, her phone had 5 missed calls, all from Kaylin. No texts, just missed calls. She didn't call back. She didn't block him either. She just didn't answer, because silence, when it comes from someone who's always been quiet, speaks volumes. Later that evening, Kaylin texted, "Can we talk?" Then another, "I miss you." Then a third, "Please come home. I can explain." She stared at the screen. Explain what? That he waved at another woman like he used to wave at her. That his scent had traveled farther than his honesty. That his affection had an address she didn't know. She powered the phone off, not to punish, but to pause. She needed time. And always wasn't time. Silence was. Ava made dinner. Stir-fry and jasmine rice. They ate on the couch, reruns of a comedy show playing in the background. At one point, Nyla laughed. Really laughed. Ava looked over, smiling. "There you are. I forgot what that felt like." Ava nodded. "Then don't forget again." That night, Nyla journaled. But this time, she didn't start with a question. She wrote a statement. "Love shouldn't feel like convincing someone to see you." She paused. Then wrote another. "I don't miss him. I miss who I was when he saw me." The next morning, Nyla returned to their apartment. Not to stay, to confront. She walked in while Kaylin was sitting at the dining table, phone in hand, dark circles under his eyes. He stood immediately. "Nyla." She held up a hand. "Let me speak." He nodded. She walked to the counter, placed the bar of soap in front of him. "Familiar?" He looked down at it, then up at her. "Where did you get this?" "You already know." He exhaled. "It's not what you think. It never is," she said, voice steady. "Until it is." Kaylin walked to the window, back turned. "It was one time, before I proposed. I didn't think she'd find me. I didn't think I'd see her again. But you did." "Yes. And she's pregnant." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Nyla stepped closer, her voice soft but sharp. "You didn't tell me because you wanted both lives. Yours with me, and whatever this is with her." Kaylin turned, pain in his eyes. "I was trying to protect what we had." "No," Nyla said. "You were trying to protect yourself." He opened his mouth. She stopped him. "You could have told me. I might have been angry, hurt, but I would have respected the truth. Instead, you lied with every silent night. Every, 'I'm tired.' Every time you kissed me while carrying her scent on your skin." Kaylin stepped forward. "Please, Nyla, don't leave like this." She looked at him. Tired, empty, done. "I'm not leaving like this," she said. "I'm leaving like I should have a long time ago." With clarity, she walked to the bedroom, grabbed her bag from the corner, and headed for the door. Kaylin followed. "I'll fix it. I swear. I'll do whatever you want." She turned, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You taught me what silence feels like. Now I'm teaching you what absence does." Then she closed the door behind her. No slam, no tears, just finality. Have you ever stayed silent when your heart was breaking, just to protect someone else's comfort? If you've ever chosen peace over chaos or walked away with your dignity instead of a scream, then this story speaks your truth. Drop a comment below if you believe silence can be strength. Hit like if you've ever had to let go of someone who didn't notice they were losing you. And subscribe, because stories like Nyla's aren't just fiction. They're real, they're powerful, and they matter. 2 weeks after Nyla left, the rain came back to Charlotte. Not a storm, not loud, just a steady drizzle, enough to smear the sky grey and make everything feel slower. Nyla drove through the city in silence. No music, no calls, no thoughts loud enough to matter. She was heading downtown, picking up a catered order for a women's business event she'd helped organize. It was small, local, important. A reminder that her life still had meaning, even as her marriage sat behind her like a closed door. She turned onto Tryon Street. The light ahead turned red. She eased to a stop. And then, there he was. Kalin, standing across the intersection, wearing the coat she'd given him last Christmas, hands in his pockets, smiling, but not at her. Her eyes followed his line of sight. A woman stepped out of a building, glass, tall, modern, maybe a law firm, maybe real estate. Nyla didn't care. What she noticed was this: the woman was pregnant, clearly pregnant. 7, maybe 8 months along. She had a gentle smile, no makeup. Long coat, hand resting lightly on her belly, like it was the safest place in the world. She looked at Kalin and waved. Without hesitation, Kalin waved back. Soft, familiar, automatic, like he'd done it many times. The light turned green. Nyla didn't move. Her grip on the wheel didn't loosen. She stared, heart thudding quietly in her chest. Not loud, not panicked, just steady, focused. Kalin didn't see her. He looked peaceful, the kind of peaceful he hadn't shown her in months. In that moment, time split. There was the life she'd lived, with second chances, hopeful patience, silent pain. And there was the life she saw, across that crosswalk, the one where he had another truth. A truth with eyes, a smile, a baby on the way. She could have honked, rolled down the window, yelled. But what would she say? What would she ask? No question would undo that wave. The light blinked yellow, then red again. A car behind her tapped the horn lightly. Still, Nyla didn't move. She wasn't frozen. She was awakening. This was the moment everything she suspected met everything she now knew. He wasn't hers. Not fully, not anymore, maybe not ever. Finally, she pressed the gas and drove on. But something inside her stayed at that red light, staring, confirming, letting go. Later that evening, back at Ava's place, Nyla stood in the shower for nearly 30 minutes. Not crying, just standing still, hands against the tile, water hitting her back. The woman's face stayed in her mind. The way she smiled, the comfort in her wave, the way Kalin returned it. There was no guilt in his posture, no hesitation, no fear of being seen, which meant he wasn't hiding, not from her, not from the other woman, only from Nyla. When she finally stepped out and wrapped herself in a towel, Ava was waiting with a blanket and hot tea. Nyla sat on the bed. I saw her. Ava didn't ask who. She knew. She's pregnant. Ava sat beside her. I didn't confront him. I didn't say a word. I just watched. A long pause. Then Nyla whispered, "It was the wave that broke me." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" He waved like he knew her, like she mattered, like, "I didn't." That night, Nyla couldn't sleep. She lay on the edge of Ava's guest bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, not replaying, not imagining, just accepting. The truth didn't shout. It didn't come with drama. It stood quietly on a sidewalk, under a grey sky, wearing a baby bump and a soft smile. The next morning, Kalin texted again. "We need to talk." Nyla read it, locked her phone, and slid it across the table. She wasn't ready. Not because she was afraid of the truth, but because she already had it. And now, she had to decide what to do with it. She took a walk through Marshall Park. The ducks moved slowly along the water. Kids played on the swings. 2 women nearby shared stories over coffee and strollers. One looked up at her and smiled. Nyla smiled back. And then something strange happened. She felt free, still hurt, still processing, but free, like something heavy had finally dropped. Not because someone caught it, but because she stopped carrying it. She sat on a bench and pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, typed, "Love doesn't end in one moment. It ends in 1,000 ignored ones." Then added, "He waved at her the way he used to wave at me." She stared at those lines, then locked her phone again. When she returned to Ava's that afternoon, she had a calm in her step. Not peace, not yet, but control. She would face him, not to fight, but to close the chapter. The truth had already been written. All that was left was the final sentence. Nyla didn't text him back. She drove instead, not to their penthouse, but to a quiet park near the old apartment they once rented back when Kaylin still left notes on the fridge and kissed her neck just because. She sat on a bench overlooking a shallow pond, her fingers curled around a lukewarm coffee cup she barely sipped from. Kaylin arrived 10 minutes later. He looked tired. No suit, no pretense. Just jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie she hadn't seen him wear in months. The man who walked toward her wasn't the polished CEO the public saw. He was the man she used to love, the one who once brought her soup when she had the flu, who tied her shoes when her ankle was sprained, who whispered goodnight even when they were fighting. But that man had stopped showing up, and now he was standing in front of her, hands buried in his pockets, mouth unsure where to begin. "Hey," she didn't respond. He sat beside her slowly. They listened to the birds for a minute. Then he said, "You saw her, didn't you?" Still, she said nothing. "Not yet." Kaylin exhaled. "Her name is Ria. We met a long time ago, before you and I got serious. She didn't tell me anything until a few months ago. Said she didn't want to disrupt my life. But—" Nyla's voice cut in. Calm, clear. "But she's pregnant." He nodded. 7 months. "She told me in May." Nyla turned slightly, facing him now. "May? You knew in May." Kaylin swallowed. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose you. So, instead, you lied to me for 5 months." "I didn't lie." "You did," she said sharply, but her tone never rose. "Every time you kissed me with that truth in your mouth, every time you left the room to take her calls, every time you told me nothing was wrong." Kaylin's voice dropped. "I didn't sleep with her after we got together. I swear to you." Nyla looked away. "That's not what hurts me the most." He frowned. "Then what?" She turned back, eyes glistening. "You waved at her like she meant something to you." Silence. Kaylin didn't speak, because he knew she was right. "That moment," she said slowly, "watching you smile at her, that told me everything I'd been afraid to say out loud. You've been living a split life, Kaylin, and I'm the one who's been shrinking to make room for it." He shook his head. "I never meant to make you feel small, but you did. I was scared." She raised an eyebrow. "Of what? That I'd leave?" He nodded. "But I'm leaving now anyway." Kaylin's chest rose with a long breath. Nyla stood. "Not because you made a mistake, but because you kept it alive in secret. Because you chose silence when honesty could have saved us." Kaylin stood too. "Can't we fix it?" She looked at him. The man who once promised her forever. The man who couldn't tell her the truth when it mattered most. The man who waved at another life while hers was falling apart behind closed doors. "No," she said simply. "We can't fix something you refused to admit was broken." He stepped forward, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "Don't," she said gently. And that was it. No shouting, no name-calling, no dramatic exit. Just a woman choosing herself. Finally, Nyla turned and walked toward her car. Kaylin didn't follow. She didn't check if he did. She didn't need to. Some people lose you, not because of what they did, but because of what they refused to do. Back at Ava's apartment, she didn't break down. She curled into the couch, pulled the blanket to her chin and whispered, "I'm done." Ava, across the room, nodded, not with pity, but with quiet pride. The next day, Nyla began looking at places in Raleigh. She needed a clean start. She found a one-bedroom loft above a small coffee shop owned by a retired teacher and her son. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She signed the lease that weekend, packed her things quietly, box by box. Kalen didn't try to stop her again. He sent one final message. "You were always the better half of us. I see that now. I'm sorry it took me losing you to understand." She didn't respond, not because she hated him, but because she didn't need to answer anymore. She had already spoken, with her absence. In her new apartment, the first thing she unpacked was her old journal. She placed it on the desk near the window, opened it, and wrote, "He waved at someone else. But I stopped waiting for him to wave at me again, and that was the moment I won." The new place in Raleigh was quiet. Not the lonely kind of quiet Nyla had known in her old home, but the kind that felt earned, like calm after a storm you didn't cause but chose to walk away from anyway. There were no marble countertops, no floor-to-ceiling windows, no concierge. But there was peace. The loft was small but filled with sunlight by late morning. The air always smelled faintly of cinnamon from the coffee shop downstairs. And every morning when she woke, she felt lighter. No Kalen in the kitchen, no silence hovering between them. Just her. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. She unpacked, slowly. Each box was more than belongings, it was memories. She found a hoodie she'd stolen from Kalen during their second month of dating. She folded it neatly and placed it in the donation pile. She found a set of unused anniversary candles. She lit one, not for him, for herself, because healing wasn't always about burning bridges. Sometimes it was about lighting your own way forward. On her third day in Raleigh, she walked into a shared workspace near Glenwood South. A few women sat in the open lounge, laptops open, soft music playing. One woman looked up, smiled, and asked, "First day?" Nyla smiled back. "Feels like my first everything." The woman introduced herself as June. She ran a marketing firm and helped small businesses grow their online reach. "Consulting?" she asked Nyla. "Strategy and operations," Nyla replied. June nodded. "You're gonna do great here. You've got that composed kind of energy." "Thanks. I'm working on making it real." By the end of the first week, Nyla had already met 3 new clients. A woman running a home daycare, another who wanted to open a boutique fitness studio, and one launching a vegan snack brand. They were passionate, curious, and bold. Helping them reminded Nyla of herself, who she used to be before she started measuring her worth by how someone else saw her. One evening, while working late, June sat beside her and offered her half a sandwich. "You eat like someone who forgets to eat," she said playfully. Nyla laughed. "You're not wrong." They ate quietly, exchanging stories between bites. At one point, June asked, "So, what brings you to Raleigh?" "Family." Nyla shook her head. "A fresh start." June didn't push. She simply nodded. "Then I'm glad you're here." Later that night, Nyla stood at her window, tea in hand, watching the city wind down. She pulled her journal closer and wrote, "It's strange. The silence in this apartment feels different. Not like something's missing, but like I finally made room for myself." She paused, then added, "I'm not lonely. I'm alone. There's a difference." That weekend, she visited a local women's event, small business owners gathering, at a community center to share ideas, sell products, and support each other. She walked through the rows slowly, taking in handmade candles, art, skincare, baked goods. Near the back corner, she saw a familiar setup, soft signage, natural tones, soap bars neatly arranged. She paused. Her breath caught, the scent in the air, sweet almond and vanilla, the same one that had once clung to Kalen's shirt. Rhea. She didn't see her at first. Then, from behind a wooden shelf, Rhea stepped forward, pregnant belly now fully round, her hands gently bracing her back as she adjusted something on the display. Their eyes met, a flicker of recognition, followed by stillness. Rhea didn't panic. She didn't turn away. She simply straightened, nodded softly, and said, "You're Nyla." Not a question, a knowing. Nyla nodded. "I am." Rhea placed both hands on her belly. "Do you want to sit?" Nyla hesitated, then stepped forward. They sat on a nearby bench, tucked behind the display. No one else noticed. 2 women, 1 man between them. But this moment belonged to neither him nor the past. Only them. "I didn't know about you when we met," Rhea said calmly. "It was years ago. We weren't serious." "He didn't mention anyone." Nyla nodded. "He said it happened before he proposed." Rhea sighed. "He didn't know about the baby until I was already showing. I waited because I wasn't sure I could handle the fallout. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to figure out how to be a mother." Nyla studied her. There was no malice, no smugness, no shame. Just a woman trying to survive, like she had. "You didn't owe me anything," Nyla said. "He did. I know." They sat quietly. Then Rhea added, "I never asked him for money, or anything. I told him I'd raise this baby with or without him." Nyla looked down at her hands. "They look happy," she whispered. "The 2 of you. When I saw you, you looked comfortable with him." Rhea turned to her. "I hadn't seen him in days. He stopped responding after he said you saw us. He looked like a man trying to breathe through guilt." Nyla blinked. Not because she was surprised, but because maybe part of her had needed to hear that. Rhea pulled a small envelope from her bag. "I wrote this the day I saw you across the street. I didn't know if I'd ever get to hand it to you." She handed it over. Nyla hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." Rhea stood slowly, rubbing her back. "If you ever want to talk again, about him, about life, about motherhood, I'll be around. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want to share him." A pause. "I wanted peace, just like you." Nyla watched her return to her booth, the soft light catching her curls as she rearranged a display. She looked full of life, not because of the child, but because she wasn't hiding. She had made her choice, quiet, strong, unapologetic, and so had Nyla. That night, back in her loft, Nyla opened the envelope. It was handwritten, short. "You were never the problem. You were always the prize. I don't envy you. I respect you. I hope your peace comes and stays. Rhea." Nyla closed her eyes. The tears came quietly this time. Not because she was broken, but because she had finally been seen. Not as Kaylin's wife, not as someone's shadow, but as a woman with her own name. Nyla sat by her window long after reading the letter. The envelope rested on her desk, open but not discarded. She read it again, then again, not because she was confused, but because something about those few words settled in her chest like closure. Real closure. Not the kind people demand from others. The kind you create for yourself when you finally stop asking questions no one has the courage to answer. Later that night, she lit a candle. Not one of the fancy decorative ones Kaylin used to buy in bulk, but a simple lavender one she'd picked up at the women's market that day. The flame flickered softly as she sat cross-legged on her floor, journal in her lap. She wrote, "She saw me, not as competition, not as the bitter ex-wife. She saw my pain and didn't look away." She paused, tapped the pen against the edge of the book, and added, "That kind of honesty, quiet, unarmed and pure, is what love should have felt like all along." The next morning, she received an email from a small grant foundation in North Carolina. They were offering a partnership to support female-owned startups in underrepresented communities. The director had heard about Nyla's consulting through a recent podcast June had recommended her for. She read the email twice, then smiled. This was what she wanted to build, spaces where women like her, like Rhea, could create without permission, grow without guilt, and rise without shrinking themselves for someone else's ego. That afternoon, she and June grabbed lunch near the co-working space. June noticed the glow on Nyla's face and raised an eyebrow. "You either fell in love or turned down a man and feel good about it." Nyla laughed. "Neither." Then, after a moment, "I forgave someone." "Kaylin?" "No," Nyla said. "Myself." June nodded slowly. "That's the hardest one." Later that week, she visited a bookstore downtown. A little girl walked past her in the children's section, holding the hand of a pregnant woman. Nyla looked up. "Rhea." Their eyes met again. Unexpected but not awkward. This time, Nyla smiled first. Ria returned it. No words, just a nod, and that was enough. On her way home, Nyla thought about the kind of woman she was becoming. Not the version that Kaylin once needed, but the version she needed. A woman who didn't look for validation in a partner's eyes. A woman who asked hard questions, not to trap someone, but to free herself. A woman who didn't define her worth by someone else's loyalty. When she got back to her apartment, her phone buzzed. Kaylin. Again. This time, it was a voicemail. She listened. His voice was low, calm. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I lost that. I want you to know I see it now. You never stopped loving me. I just stopped noticing. And I'll carry that mistake the rest of my life. She deleted the message, not in anger, but because she no longer needed it. She had her answer. She stepped onto her small balcony, watching the late sun dip behind the buildings. The breeze lifted the edge of her dress. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for the apology. But I don't need your words. I have my own now." 2 days later, Nyla launched her new initiative, built from her, a coaching, strategy, and micro-grant program for women rebuilding after betrayal, heartbreak, or loss. Not just business training, but emotional rebuilding too. She posted about it on her new site. Within hours, emails came in, dozens of them. Stories from women in New York, Atlanta, Chicago, women who had been left behind, overlooked, undervalued, who wanted to do something with their pain besides surviving it. Nyla read each one with tears in her eyes. They were strangers, but they knew her. That night, she sent Ava a text. "It's happening. For real. I think I finally stepped into the version of me you always believed was there." Ava replied, "You didn't step into her. You came home to her." And that's when it clicked. She hadn't become someone new. She'd returned to herself, to the girl who once believed love meant partnership, to the woman who now knew love begins with self-trust. And any man who couldn't meet her there didn't belong. Raleigh felt warmer by the 3rd week. Not because the weather changed. Early spring still clung to the mornings like a chill she couldn't shake. But Nyla had begun sleeping again. Not lightly, not restlessly, but fully. The kind of sleep that came after emotional exhaustion gave way to clarity. The kind that came when you no longer waited for someone to come home. Because home was now hers alone. She made her morning routine sacred. Wake at 7. Journal for 10 minutes. Stretch. Hydrate. Read. Not to heal, but to remember who she was before life became about managing someone else's moods. Her loft had become a haven. Neutral walls. Bookshelves lined with stories she'd put off reading. Postcards from places she used to dream of visiting, now pinned to a corkboard near the kitchen, as reminders, not fantasies. There was a new energy in the space. She no longer played music to fill the silence. Now, she welcomed it. The absence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was presence, of self. By the 2nd Friday of the month, she sat across from a group of 6 women in a bright conference room, all attending her first built from her workshop. Each had a story. One had left a 10-year marriage after discovering her partner's second life. Another was navigating single motherhood after being abandoned during pregnancy. One just cried when Nyla asked, "What do you want to build?" Nyla gave them time, space, and most of all, permission. "You are not your pain," she told them, "but what you build from it. That's your legacy." The women leaned in. They took notes. They cried. They laughed. And for the first time, Nyla saw what it looked like to turn personal heartbreak into shared healing. After the session, June pulled her aside. "You're on fire." Nyla smiled. "I feel like me again." "No. You feel like more than you ever let yourself be." That line stuck with her. That evening, while walking through downtown, Nyla passed a couple holding hands. They reminded her of herself and Kaylin, once upon a time. But she didn't ache. She didn't miss him. She missed who she used to be around him, before his silence made her question her instincts. before his secrets made her doubt her worth. And now? Now she had no interest in repeating the cycle with anyone. If a man couldn't sit with her truth, he didn't deserve her time. She spent the weekend working from her balcony, writing content for her upcoming podcast. It was called Quiet Wins, Stories of Women Who Walked Away and Rose Higher. Her first episode was about betrayal, not the kind people whisper about, the kind that comes from long silences, late replies, and I'm just tired that last for months. The kind that eats away at your spirit not with punches, but with absence. Sunday afternoon, she visited a quiet trail just outside the city. She wore sneakers, a hoodie, and a crossbody bag with her water bottle and notebook. She hiked slowly. Steady breath, steady heart. At one point, she stopped beneath a canopy of trees. Birds overhead, leaves rustling softly. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm not angry anymore." She didn't realize someone was behind her until she turned to leave. An older woman, maybe mid-60s, stood a few paces back, smiling kindly. "I heard what you said," the woman said. Nyla chuckled lightly, slightly embarrassed. "Just talking to myself," the woman nodded. "We all have to. Sometimes we're the only ones listening." She walked past Nyla, slowly disappearing into the trees, but her words lingered. Sometimes we're the only ones listening, and sometimes that's the point. That night, Nyla made soup, not because it was cold, because it reminded her of when Kaylin used to make it badly, and she'd pretend it was great. She laughed, thinking about it. Not with bitterness, but with memory. Everything didn't have to hurt to be true. Before bed, she picked up her journal. She wrote, "Absence isn't the opposite of love. It's what happens when love stops being safe to live in." And underneath that, "But I'm learning this. Absence can also be a beginning. An empty chair becomes space for someone who sees you. An empty bed becomes rest without worry. An empty inbox becomes peace instead of false hope." She fell asleep that night with the windows cracked open, the wind soft against her curtains. And she dreamed, not of Kaylin, but of her own voice, on a stage in a room full of women, telling the truth without apology. Monday morning came without dread. No meetings she didn't want. No conversations she had to prepare her heart for. Just clarity. Nyla woke up before the alarm and stretched under the soft cream throw she kept at the foot of her bed. She turned on the kettle, moved barefoot through the kitchen, then sat by her desk to review emails. One stood out. Subject, request for interview, Women Who Rise podcast. The host, a journalist named Melody Ross, had heard about Nyla's built from her initiative through the Raleigh business circuit. She wanted to feature Nyla's journey, personal and professional. Nyla read the email twice. It wasn't that she didn't want to share. It was that this time, her story wouldn't be about Kaylin. It would be about her. And that felt new. She wrote back with one sentence, "I'd be honored." Then hit send. That afternoon, Nyla stopped by the coffee shop downstairs. The barista, a college student with bright curls and bright eyes, handed her the usual. "Green tea with honey. You're becoming a regular." Nyla smiled. "Some habits are worth keeping." The barista grinned. "You always look so focused when you're working upstairs, like peaceful, focused. What do you do?" "I help women rebuild their lives." The girl's smile softened. "That's beautiful." Nyla thanked her and turned to leave. But something in her chest lifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming someone others could see again. Later that week, during a break between sessions, June brought her an iced coffee and a grin. "You're booked for 2 more workshops, one in Durham, one in Greensboro." "You're kind of a thing now." Nyla laughed. "Let's not jinx it." "I'm serious," June said. "You're doing something big, not loud, not flashy, but real, and real sticks." That word again, real. She wasn't performing strength. She wasn't masking pain. She was living. And it showed. That night, Nyla recorded her first podcast episode. No script, just her and the mic. Her voice steady. "This isn't a story about a man. It's a story about what happens when a woman finally listens to herself, when she stops waiting for someone to choose her and chooses peace instead. My name is Nyla. I built from the silence. And every week I'll sit here with you. No filters, no shame, just truth. She paused, then said quietly, "This is for every woman who kept her pain private because the world said strength was quiet. I'm here to tell you, your quiet is power, and your story is not over." After uploading it, she walked to her window. The city moved beneath her. Cars passed. Street lights glowed. Somewhere, people were breaking up, falling in love, running errands, starting over. And here she was, breathing, soft, still, whole. The next day, she received a package. No return name, just a box. Inside, a hardcover journal, black leather, gold trim, a note tucked inside. "You always said silence was heavy. I hope you're using your voice now. Kaylin." No letter, no apology, just an acknowledgement. She closed the journal gently, placed it on the lowest shelf. Not out of resentment, but because she didn't need it anymore. She had her own now. At her next workshop, she opened with a question. What's one thing you gave up that you want back? Not a person, but a part of yourself. The answers poured in. My sense of humor, my confidence, my morning dance routine, my handwriting, my voice. Nyla smiled softly and replied, "Then let's get those back." That evening, while cleaning out her files, she found an old envelope. From their wedding day, Kaylin had written her a letter. She hadn't opened it in years. She sat on the floor and unfolded it. "You make me feel like I deserve peace. You're the softest place I've ever known. I'll never stop protecting what we have." She folded it back slowly and said out loud, "You did stop." And that was the last time she read it. She placed it in a keepsake box, not because she wanted to keep the past. That night, she called her mother. They hadn't spoken in weeks. Her mom answered on the second ring, warm and curious. They talked for an hour. No questions about Kaylin, just laughter, updates, comfort. Before hanging up, her mother said, "You sound full again, baby." Nyla looked around at the simple life she was creating. "I am." As she climbed into bed, she pulled her blanket up to her chest, looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "I don't miss him. I miss who I thought we were." And that was okay, because who she was now was everything she was meant to be. Have you ever learned how powerful your silence can be once you stop filling it with someone else's noise? Share your story in the comments. Hit like if you've ever rebuilt yourself after someone else let go. Subscribe if you believe quiet strength is still strength. The days began to move faster. Nyla barely noticed at first. Her calendar filled. Her inbox stayed active. Her voice, once tentative, now moved through rooms with calm authority. But what stood out most was how normal peace had become. She no longer woke up bracing for tension, no longer waited for a text to explain silence, no longer scanned faces in crowds, wondering if she'd see him. Kaylin had become a chapter she didn't need to reopen. She remembered him. Of course she did. But it was like remembering a place you moved away from, beautiful in parts, but not one you could live in again. One Thursday morning, June peeked into Nyla's shared office space and tossed a small box on her desk. "Open it." Nyla raised a brow. "Should I be worried?" June grinned. "Nope." Excited. Inside, a custom-made microphone with her podcast logo engraved on the side. "Quiet wins." Nyla ran her fingers over it. "June, you're not small anymore. Might as well sound like it too." They both laughed, but Nyla's eyes shimmered with something deeper. Gratitude, not for the gift, but for the kind of friendship that didn't try to fix her, just stood beside her while she healed. That afternoon, she recorded her third episode. No notes, no edits. Just a story about the night she first realized love could live in silence. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He didn't curse or cheat while I watched. He just stopped seeing me. And I stayed, because I kept trying to make myself visible again. She paused. But the truth is, You should never have to convince someone to see you. You're not an illusion. You're a woman. And that alone is enough. After she posted the episode, she stepped out for a walk. The streets of Raleigh buzzed quietly with early evening energy. She passed a couple holding hands, a family laughing near a food truck, a young girl dancing in a circle while her father filmed. Nyla didn't envy them. She didn't ache for what they had. She smiled, not because she wanted their lives, but because she no longer wished hers looked different. Later, she passed a bookstore and walked inside on impulse. The air smelled like paper and lavender. She browsed for a while, running her fingers along the spines of titles she hadn't had time for in years. One book caught her eye, The Beauty of Leaving. She opened to a random page. Sometimes strength isn't walking away, it's staying gone. She bought it without reading the rest. That night, she made dinner, mushroom risotto with roasted garlic. She played old soul music, the kind her dad used to play on Sunday mornings growing up. As the rice simmered, she danced in the kitchen. Not for anyone, not to prove anything, just for herself, just because she could. After dinner, she pulled out her journal and flipped back to her earliest entries from when she first left Charlotte. The pain was raw, sharp, each line had bled, but now, reading them felt like watching someone else's storm. She wasn't in it anymore. She had made it through, and not just survived, but grown. She wrote, "I am not bitter, I am not cold, I am not closed. I am cautious, I am learning, I am healing. But I am still soft. And that softness is no longer weakness. It's my proof." Before bed, she sat by the window, legs curled beneath her, a glass of lemon water in hand. She looked out at the city, not searching, just observing, just present. The street below was quiet. Her mind was too. And for the first time since leaving Kaylin, she thought, I would let someone love me again one day. But they'll have to meet me here, in this peace, with no noise, with no lies, with no half-truths dressed as protection. She smiled, then whispered to herself, I'm still soft, but I'm not small anymore, and turned off the light. The morning of her podcast interview arrived quietly. Nyla stood in front of her closet longer than usual. She wasn't dressing to impress, but she wanted to feel steady. She chose a dark green blouse, calm, grounded, and wide-leg pants that made her feel powerful but comfortable. Hair tied back, gold studs in her ears, no need for anything else. She wasn't performing strength today. She was simply showing up as herself. The studio was warm and bright, nestled in an office park that felt far too relaxed for how big the show had become. Melody Ross, the host, greeted her with a soft smile and zero pretension. I've been looking forward to this, Melody said. Your story isn't just compelling, it's healing. Nyla blinked. No one had ever said that before, not even Ava. They settled into the recording room. The intro music faded. The red light came on, and Melody opened. Today's guest built something many of us only dream of, not just a business, but a second chance. She didn't go viral. She didn't write a tell-all. She rebuilt her life from silence, and now she's helping thousands of women do the same. Please welcome Nyla. The questions were soft but direct, not invasive, just intentional. What did you believe about love before you left him? What made you stay so long in silence? When did you know you were ready to speak again? Nyla answered honestly. I thought loyalty meant holding on even when it hurt. I thought silence was mature. I thought leaving would mean failure. But then I realized, loving someone shouldn't feel like disappearing. Melody leaned in, and now I know that softness isn't weakness, and peace isn't boring, and strength doesn't always sound like a clapback. Sometimes it's just walking away with your dignity. When the episode ended, the room fell still. Melody whispered, that was church. They laughed, but Nyla's heart felt full. She didn't cry during the interview, but afterward, in the bathroom mirror, she looked at herself and smiled. This woman, this version, was the one she fought to become. Later that evening, she sat in her loft, phone buzzing non-stop with messages. Not the kind from Kaylen, but from women. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Strangers from all over. Thank you for saying what I never could. Your story is mine. I didn't know we were allowed to leave quietly. I stayed too long too. I thought I was the only one. You helped me let go. Nyla put her phone down and leaned back. The tears came now, but they were soft, clean, not pain, release. She wrote in her journal, healing isn't a loud finish. It's the quiet middle, where you realize you no longer need them to hurt for you to be free. The next week, she was invited to speak at a women's panel in Charlotte. It would be the first time returning to the city since leaving. She accepted, not because she wanted to prove something, but because she didn't need to anymore. She arrived 2 hours early and walked the city on foot. The coffee shop where she and Kaylen had their first date, the park where he proposed, the building where she once caught him waving at another woman, all still there, unchanged, but she had. After the event, she stood by the hallway exit, speaking with attendees. A familiar voice called her name. She turned. Kaylen, hair longer, beard fuller, eyes tired, but not broken. Nyla. She nodded once. Calm, clear. Kaylen, I heard your episode. She said nothing. He continued, I just wanted you to know, I'm proud of you. Another pause. I didn't deserve you. I know that now. Still, she didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she asked gently, Are you a better man? He swallowed. I'm trying to be. She nodded. Good. Then don't waste it. He stepped aside. She walked past him. No final word. No glance back. Some people are lessons, not losses. That night, back in Raleigh, she lit another candle, and for the first time, she whispered the truth out loud. I forgave him. Then added, and I forgave me too. Have you ever forgiven someone, not because they said the right thing, but because you were finally done holding what they broke? Tell me what your heart says in the comments. Like this if you've ever walked away quietly, but powerfully. Subscribe if peace and dignity are part of your healing journey. The envelope was small, cream-colored, no return address, no scent, just her name, handwritten in soft cursive, Nyla. She found it resting on her apartment mailbox the Monday after her return from Charlotte. No fanfare, no warning. For a moment, she stared at it like it was a trap. But her heart already knew. Rhea, back in her loft, she didn't open it right away. She made tea, took a shower, lit a candle, then sat at her desk, sunlight falling across her lap, and slowly peeled it open. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, neat, deliberate, written with intention. Dear Nyla, I didn't plan to write you. I wasn't sure if I should, but something kept pressing on my chest, and I've learned not to ignore the things that stay heavy. First, thank you for not attacking me that day at the market, for giving me space to be human, for not treating me like a threat when I know I must have looked like one. I'm not writing to defend Kaylen. I'm not writing to explain what happened. I'm writing because I saw something in you that day, something that reminded me of the woman I've been trying to become. Steady, soft, unshaken. I never wanted him back. I never wanted to cause pain. I just wanted the truth to breathe. I saw the way you looked at him, like you were seeing the final answer to a question you'd been afraid to ask. And I saw how still you were, how dignified, how sure. I hope you know what that did. Because after you walked away, he looked at the space you left like it had punched him in the stomach. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stared. He never mentioned you after that. Not directly. But sometimes I caught him in a moment, looking at a chair, or his phone, or the street, and I knew he was somewhere else. Somewhere with you. I didn't envy it. I respected it. Some loves are once in a lifetime, and some men don't know how to hold them. I'm raising this child on my own, not because Kaylen failed me, but because I didn't want to raise a child inside confusion. But I thought you should know. He said your name in his sleep once. Quiet, pained. I left the room after that. Because I knew I may have carried his child, but you carried his heart. Be well. Be free. Ria. Nyla read the letter twice, then once more, then folded it gently, like a truth too delicate to crush. She placed it inside her journal, closed it with care, then leaned back and let the silence speak. It didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It felt still. Later, she went for a walk. No phone, no podcast, no distractions. Just her, the breeze, and the city. As she passed a small park near her neighborhood, she spotted a father helping his daughter balance on a beam. Her laugh echoed. Bright, free. Ria's letter came back to her, not the part about Kaylin, but the part about clarity, about choosing to raise a child inside peace, not pain. She sat on a bench and watched the family play, and for the first time, she didn't feel like someone who lost. She felt like someone who let go. And there's a difference. That night, she added a page to her journal. Sometimes the woman he chose still writes you letters, and instead of hate, she offers honor. Instead of blame, she gives clarity. She didn't reply. There was no return address anyway. But even if there had been, some things don't need a reply. Some stories close with a folded letter, and a woman finally resting in her own wholeness. The next day, Nyla returned to her routine. Emails, calls, 2 client sessions, a virtual workshop. She smiled during the Zoom meeting, nodded during a coaching call, and gave clear feedback to a client launching her first product line. But behind her calm voice, Ria's letter lingered, not like a bruise, more like a scar you can finally touch without flinching. That night, she found herself sitting by her bookshelf again. She pulled down one of her older journals, the one she'd written in during her 2nd year of marriage. She hadn't opened it since before the move. Curiosity tugged. She flipped through the pages, scanned familiar handwriting, and one entry stopped her. He came home late again. I didn't ask why. I just sat there, waiting for him to notice me. He didn't. Is this what marriage becomes? A quiet wait in a room that used to feel like a home? She closed the book slowly, pressed it against her chest, whispered to the woman she had been, "You don't live there anymore." Later that week, she visited a women's CO to OP meeting in Durham. She was asked to speak briefly about courage, how to find it, how to hold it. She stood in front of the small group of women, some mothers, some entrepreneurs, some survivors, and paused before saying anything. Then softly, "Courage isn't loud. It doesn't always show up in speeches or grand exits. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to stop begging for someone to choose you. Sometimes it's the moment you fold the laundry, cook dinner, and still decide, I deserve better than this." Nods filled the room. Tears quietly followed. Nyla smiled. She wasn't healing for them. She was healing with them. That weekend, she met Ava for brunch. It had been a while. They chose a quiet patio cafe with flowering vines and strong coffee. Ava sipped her drink, tilted her head and said, "You look different." "Different how?" "Like you belong to yourself again." Nyla laughed softly. "I do." They talked about work, family, her upcoming panel in Atlanta. But eventually the topic shifted. Ava leaned in. "Did he ever try to reach out again?" Nyla nodded. "Once. Briefly." "Did you respond?" "No." "Do you miss him?" A pause. Nyla stirred her drink slowly, then said, "I miss what I thought we had, not what it really was." Ava exhaled. "That's growth." "No, that's grace." That evening, Nyla finally returned to her podcast mic. She hadn't planned on recording that day, but her thoughts had weight, and her voice needed space. She hit record and began. "A woman I once called the other woman wrote me a letter, and instead of bitterness, she gave me peace. Not because she owed it to me, but because she understood we were both given a version of the same man, and neither of us was ever really the problem." She paused. "Sometimes you'll meet someone in the middle of your pain, and they'll help you close the loop, not keep it open." That's what her letter did. It didn't reopen a wound, it sealed it, quietly. Finally, that episode became her most played one yet. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was human. Women flooded her inbox again, not with heartbreak stories, but with gratitude. You helped me stop hating the wrong person. Your podcast made me realize I can forgive her too. I needed that permission to let go, without needing revenge. Nyla smiled at her phone, then turned it over and let the messages rest. She wasn't chasing noise anymore. She was living in stillness. The next morning, she received a letter in her P.O. box. It wasn't from Rhea. It was from a listener in Houston. Inside was a photo of a woman and her daughter, standing outside a new salon they had just opened. The note read, "Your podcast gave me the final push. I left the man. I built the shop. My daughter watches me now, and she sees someone whole." Nyla held the photo, heart full. This was the purpose her pain had been pointing her toward, not just to escape it, but to transform it. That night she wrote, "Rhea gave me a letter, but life gave me a second chance, not with Kaylin, with myself. And I took it." It had been 4 months since Nyla left Charlotte. 4 months since the red light. 4 months since the wave. 4 months since the woman. 4 months since the silence that told her everything. And still, not once did she wish to go back. Not to the penthouse. Not to the half-hearted dinners. Not to the invisible version of herself she used to shrink into just to keep the peace. She didn't crave closure anymore. She had it, in her new mornings, in the work she was building, in the sound of her own laughter. But life had a way of testing healed wounds. And it did so quietly, the way most turning points arrive. It came in a package, medium-sized, wrapped in brown paper, delivered to her work address, not her home. No return label, no logo, no warning. Her assistant brought it into the office with a curious look. "This came for you." No sender. Nyla's heart didn't race. It didn't drop. She was steady. She opened it slowly, pulling apart the taped edges. Inside, a black notebook, thick cover, cream-colored pages. Tucked inside the front flap was a small card, handwritten in familiar pen strokes. "You always said silence was heavy. I hope you're using your voice now. Kaylin." She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't tear up. She simply placed the notebook on her desk, closed the lid, and whispered, "I am." That night, she didn't call Ava. She didn't journal about it. She didn't even tell June. She just made dinner, shrimp sautéed in lemon garlic, couscous and asparagus, and ate with Jazz playing softly in the background. Because his gesture wasn't a pull, it was proof. That distance speaks. That absence leaves echoes people don't expect. That when you finally go quiet, those who took your presence for granted hear it loudest. The next morning, she placed the notebook in her storage drawer. Not to be used, not to be burned. Just to be put away. Because not everything demands a reaction. Some things deserve only acknowledgement and closure. That week, she spoke at a panel titled, "What We Keep and What We Leave." The audience was filled with business owners, advocates, artists, and women who had built themselves back from various forms of betrayal. During the Q&A, one woman stood up and asked, "How do you know when you've healed?" Nyla smiled gently. "When the thing that once broke you returns to you quietly, and you don't feel the need to pick it back up." The room fell still. Then someone clapped, and then everyone did. Afterward, an attendee came up and said, "Your story helped me forgive someone I thought I'd carry forever." Nyla nodded. "Then it's working." That weekend, she recorded a short podcast episode called "The Things We Don't Say Anymore." In it, she talked about the silence that follows walking away, not the kind meant to punish, but the kind meant to protect peace. "I used to believe I needed to say everything, every hurt, every reason, every final word. But now I know. Sometimes silence isn't avoidance. It's clarity." A few days later, a direct message came in from someone unexpected. Kaylin's sister. They hadn't spoken in over a year. The message read, "I don't know if this is crossing a line, but I wanted to say, I always admired you, and I'm sorry for everything my brother didn't say." Nyla didn't reply, but she smiled, because even echoes carry the truth when the source won't. She went to bed that night, feeling warm, not because of anything new, but because the old things no longer had power. Kaylin could send letters, people could send apologies, memories could visit, but none of it could move her anymore. She had arrived at her own life, and she was staying. 3 weeks passed. The notebook stayed untouched in the drawer. The podcast grew. The emails kept coming, but so did a quiet feeling, a soft pulse Nyla couldn't ignore. Not pain, not longing, just reflection, not on Kaylin, but on the woman she had once been with him, the one who waited, who withheld, who whispered, "I'm fine," while screaming inside. She didn't mourn that woman anymore. She honored her, because, even in silence, that version of herself had endured, and in enduring, she became the bridge to the woman Nyla now was. That Friday, she received an invitation, a women's leadership summit in Atlanta, keynote speaker slot. June placed it on her desk with a smirk. "Told you. You're becoming a thing." Nyla read the letter twice. A 2-day event, 600 attendees. All women, entrepreneurs, founders, visionaries. She would be opening night. Topic: the power of leaving. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan. She whispered aloud, "Do I have the right to stand on a stage and speak about leaving when I once begged myself to stay?" The quiet didn't answer. But her heart did. "You do, because you left anyway." On the day of the summit, she stood backstage in a navy jumpsuit and block heels, steadying her breath as the final introduction played. A woman on the mic called out, "She's the voice behind one of the fastest-growing podcasts for women. She's not just building a brand, she's building bridges. Please welcome." Nyla. Applause. Warm, welcoming. Not for the perfect version of her, but for the real one. She stepped out into the lights, took the mic, looked out at the sea of women, every shade, every shape, every age. Then she began, "When I left my marriage, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't break dishes or post quotes online. I just left. I packed a weekend bag. I left the watch he gave me. I didn't take the jewelry. I took my silence. And I left." She looked around the room. Some women nodded. Others wiped their eyes. Because sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever do is walk away without a sound. Not to be cold, not to be cruel, but because staying would mean abandoning yourself. She spoke for 30 minutes. No slides, no prompts, just truth. When she finished, the room stood. It wasn't the applause that moved her. It was the woman in the third row, standing with tears in her eyes, mouthing the words, "Thank you." Afterward, while exiting the venue, she spotted a familiar figure leaning against a far wall. Tall, still, waiting. Kaylin. He didn't approach. He just watched her, maybe to see if she'd stop. She didn't. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing more to give. She offered him one thing, what he hadn't given her at the end, a nod. Then she turned and walked out the door. That night, back in her hotel suite, Nyla opened the balcony doors and sat cross-legged on a lounge chair. The city lights blinked below. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes and whispered, "This peace. I earned it, and no one gets to borrow it." She fell asleep to her own silence. Not empty, not echoing, just whole. The smell of fresh flowers filled the room. Lilies, sunflowers, wild roses. Nyla stood at the back of her new workspace, the grand opening of her official headquarters for Built from her. No longer just a corner in a shared office, no longer a temporary table. This was hers, painted walls in soft earth tones, bookshelves lined with stories written by women she admired, a quiet reading corner with a plush armchair and a lamp that felt like a hug, and, near the front entrance, a small plaque that read, "You are not what they left. You are what you chose next." The room buzzed with energy. Women from all over North Carolina had come to celebrate. Past clients, listeners of her podcast, mentors, collaborators. There was laughter, stories, hugs, and beneath it all, a sense of quiet power. They had all left something, and built something better. Nyla stood near the refreshment table when she saw her. Rhea, standing beside a stroller, hair pulled back, soft linen blouse, a calm look in her eyes. Nyla didn't flinch. She smiled first. Rhea walked over, slow, graceful. "This is beautiful," she said, voice low. "Thank you." They looked at each other for a beat. Then Nyla looked down into the stroller, a baby girl, wide-eyed, chubby-cheeked, peaceful. "How old?" Nyla asked. "Almost 5 months. She's beautiful." "She looks like him," Rhea said, "but quieter." They both smiled, not awkwardly, not bitterly, just kindly. Rhea adjusted the blanket and added, "I wasn't sure I should come." "I'm glad you did." They stepped aside to sit near the window, slightly out of view from the crowd. "Everything's so different now," Rhea said softly. "Yeah, it is." There was a pause. Then Rhea said, "I heard your last episode, the one about not picking things back up." Nyla tilted her head. "And it helped. I think I needed someone to say it, out loud." A child ran past them, laughing. Rhea smiled gently. "She deserves a mother who isn't holding bitterness." "She has one," Nyla said. Rhea looked over. "So do you." They sat in quiet understanding for a moment longer. Then Rhea reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I wasn't sure when I'd give you this, maybe never. But here." Nyla hesitated, then took it. Rhea stood, looked into the stroller, then back at Nyla. "Be well. You too." And with that, she walked away. Nyla didn't open the envelope right away. She slipped it into her purse and turned back to her guests. Later, after the crowd thinned, June pulled her into a hug. "You did this," she said. "You didn't just survive him. You built past him." Nyla exhaled. "I didn't think I could." At first, June pulled back and looked her in the eyes. "You didn't just think it, you proved it." That night, Nyla walked through her space after everyone had left. She turned off lights one by one, straightened a chair, wiped down a counter. She paused in front of the bookshelf, ran her finger across the edge of a frame that held her favorite quote, "You can love someone and still choose yourself." She sat in the reading chair, the envelope from Rhea still unopened in her lap. She finally slid her finger under the flap and pulled out a simple card. On it, Rhea had written, "Some women stay bitter, some become better. Thank you for showing me how to be the second." Rhea. Nyla closed her eyes, not to cry, but to breathe. This was what it looked like to leave something broken, and still lead others to wholeness. She placed the card inside her journal and closed it, then walked to the front door, turned the lock, turned off the lights, and walked out into the night air, calm, full, and whole. A year later, Nyla stood at the edge of a quiet rooftop, looking out over downtown Raleigh. The evening breeze played gently with the hem of her dress. The city lights blinked below, but her mind wandered back, not to pain, not to regret, but to the version of herself that once waited at a red light, frozen in disbelief. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone whole. Inside the rooftop venue, music floated from a live acoustic set. Tonight was the 1-year anniversary of Built from her. Clients had become friends, staff had become family. Nyla smiled as she stepped back into the room. June spotted her first. "Your eyes look soft tonight," she said with a smirk. "I feel soft and grounded." June nudged her. "You deserve that." Later that night, Nyla wandered into the hallway to catch her breath. A quiet moment alone. That's when she saw him. Kalin, standing across the room, near the elevator. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still sharp, But his expression held something different, something quieter, something slower. He walked over. "Nyla." She nodded. "Kaylin, I got the invite from June. She said you wouldn't mind." "I don't." They stood in the hush between old lovers. Not lovers now, not enemies either. Just people who once knew each other deeply. Kaylin's eyes scanned the room. "This is beautiful. What you've built. Thank you." He hesitated. "I've read your work. I listened to your podcast. Episode 7 made me cry." Nyla let out a small breath of laughter. "That was a hard one to record. It was honest," Kaylin said. "That's what hit me." Silence again. He swallowed hard. "Rhea sent me a picture. She said the baby's starting to walk." Nyla nodded. "She's a good mother." "She is." He looked down, fidgeting slightly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I know. I didn't know how to love you and deal with my past at the same time." "I know that too," she said softly. Kaylin met her eyes. "And I think I loved you the way I thought love was supposed to feel. Fast, fixable, strong when convenient." She nodded. "And I wanted love to feel like presence, steadiness, a place I could rest." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "You found that now?" "I'm learning it within myself." Kaylin smiled gently. "I'm proud of you." That surprised her, but she accepted it. He turned to leave but paused. "Nyla." "Yeah? Do you think someday when the wounds aren't so fresh, we could talk again, about nothing important?" Nyla smiled. "Maybe. When it's not about fixing anything, just talking." He nodded, then walked away. She didn't cry, didn't ache, didn't wonder what if. She returned to the party, holding a piece of herself that had been scattered for years. Whole now, still tender, but no longer broken. Later that night, she journaled. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It doesn't show up in grand gestures or second chances. Sometimes it's just a quiet conversation where no one flinches, and a good night's sleep without missing someone. 2 years had passed since that red light moment. Nyla sat inside a sunlit room with wide windows and soft green curtains. The space wasn't fancy, but it breathed peace. She was finishing a session with one of her mentees, Kemi, a 24-year-old baker who had just landed her first wholesale contract. They hugged at the door. "Thank you," Kemi whispered. "You're helping me dream bigger than I was raised to." Nyla smiled, holding her hands. "That's what you're supposed to do. Break ceilings for yourself, and then pass the hammer." As Kemi left, Nyla stood alone in her office. This was her life now. She didn't build it out of spite. She built it from silence, from heartbreak, from long walks alone. And now everything in it was hers. Her name on the lease, her fingerprints on the walls, her voice in every conversation. She didn't follow Kaylin on social media. She never blocked him either. From time to time, his name would pop up through mutual friends or old photos on her phone's auto album memories. But it no longer twisted her stomach. That ache had melted into something quieter. Memory, nothing more. She wasn't dating, not seriously, but she wasn't closed off either. Some nights she sat on her porch, sipping tea, imagining what it might feel like to love again. This time, slowly, with someone present, attentive, brave enough for honesty. But she wasn't rushing it. One weekend, she got a call from her mother. "We're throwing a small lunch next Sunday. Family only. Come if you can." Nyla agreed. When she arrived, she spotted someone unexpected. Rhea, holding a toddler. The child was chubby-cheeked, joyful, and running after a butterfly in the garden. Nyla paused. Rhea saw her and gave a small, almost nervous smile. "Hey!" "Hey!" The air was thick, but not with drama. Just unsaid things. Rhea walked closer, bouncing the toddler in her arms. "He likes bees, even though he's never been stung. I guess you don't need pain to love something, huh?" Nyla gave a small nod. "He's beautiful. He has Kaylin's eyes. But his joy, that's all mine." Silence. I didn't come here to make anything weird, Ria said quietly. Your mom invited me. She said I shouldn't keep him hidden from the family just because the past was messy. Nyla looked at the boy again. She's right. They both watched him giggle and trip over his own feet. I wrote you that letter 2 years ago because I didn't want to carry a story that didn't belong to me, Ria continued. I remember, Nyla said softly. Ria bit her lip. It was never about competition or replacement. I didn't even want a relationship with Kalen. I just needed him to acknowledge our son, and I needed you to know I wasn't trying to steal anything. You didn't. The words hung there, so simple, yet freeing. Would you like to hold him? Ria asked, stepping forward. Nyla blinked. You don't have to, Ria added quickly. But Nyla nodded. I would. She held the little boy in her arms. His small hands curled around her finger. His smile was easy, unbothered, like he had no idea how much pain once circled around his name. In that moment, Nyla didn't feel bitterness. She didn't feel victory. She felt something bigger. Closure, forgiveness, peace. She handed the baby back to Ria and said, You're doing a good job. Thanks. So are you. They stood in mutual respect. Two women, not defined by one man's mistakes, but strengthened by their own choices. That night, Nyla walked home under the warm southern sky. The stars were out. The air smelled like honeysuckle, and tomorrow, she whispered something to herself as she stepped inside. You don't always get the apology you want. Sometimes, life gives you a new version of yourself instead. And that version, she's the one you were waiting for all along. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived again. Same handwriting, different return address. Nyla sat at her desk, fingers resting on the envelope. She didn't open it right away. She placed it to the side, finished her call, watered her small fern, and closed her laptop for the day. Only then, when the sun dipped low and the office was quiet, did she read it. Dear Nyla, there's no perfect way to write this. I've started and stopped this note more times than I care to count. But I owe it to you, maybe more to myself, to speak with clarity. I've been in therapy for the past 8 months. I told the therapist everything. About you. About how I ruined the safest thing I ever had because I was too afraid of being known. I used to think silence was strength, but it was really avoidance. It took losing you to realize that being present, showing up with honesty, is love. I don't write to ask for another chance. I write to thank you. Your absence changed me. Your grace, even when I didn't deserve it, haunted me in the best way. You gave me the blueprint of a woman who walks away without slamming the door because she values herself enough not to stay. You taught me what love can be when it's not clinging, begging, or performing. If I could do it all over again, I'd listen sooner. I'd hold you tighter. I'd speak every thought instead of assuming silence was easier. But since I can't rewrite us, I'll just honor what you gave me by being better. If you ever want coffee, I'd like to show you who I've become. If not, I understand. You deserve peace. Either way, thank you for showing me what it looks like. Kalen. Nyla closed the letter. She didn't cry. She didn't rush to reply. She sat there and smiled, not for Kalen, but for herself. Later that evening, she called her mom. They talked about soup, about the new rug, about the family. Then, she looked outside her window. Rain started falling. Same way it had the day she saw Kalen on the sidewalk. But this time, the feeling was different. This time, she wasn't watching someone else's story unfold. She was living her own. She didn't reach out to Kalen, not right away. But she wrote something in her journal. Sometimes closure isn't a door, it's a window. One that opens when you least expect it, and lets fresh air into a room you didn't know was still sealed. Months passed. Then, one afternoon, she walked into a bookstore in Midtown Raleigh. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just something to feel. As she browsed the shelves, a voice behind her said, "You always liked the corner sections." She turned. Kalen stood there. Plain navy shirt, brown boots, softer eyes, no suits. No rehearsed charm. Just him, older, calmer. Nyla nodded. You remembered? I never forgot. They didn't hug, they didn't reach. They just stood there, for a beat longer than strangers, but shorter than lovers. I'm glad you're okay, he said quietly. I am, he smiled. You look good. So do you. And just like that, they both knew some chapters don't get rewritten. But they end better when closed with honesty. They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't set a coffee date. They said goodbye with peace in their eyes. And that was enough. Nyla walked home under a soft sky. No butterflies, no second guessing. Just warmth. She unlocked her door, kicked off her flats, and poured a cup of tea. Then, she opened her laptop and typed something for her next client newsletter. Dear woman rebuilding, you are not your broken story. You are the author of what comes next. And sometimes, the strength isn't in fixing the past. It's in choosing yourself, quietly, boldly, fully. Keep going. You're not behind. You're just beginning again. N. She clicked send. And for the first time in a long time, she leaned back and smiled. This was her life now. Not perfect, but whole. If you've ever been left in silence, if you've ever had to watch love slip away without a fight, then you understand what Nyla felt. But silence doesn't mean you're invisible, and absence doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes, walking away quietly is the loudest way to love yourself. Drop a comment below if you've ever chosen peace over pain. Tap like if you believe wholeness is better than forced love. And if Nyla's journey touched your heart, share this video with someone who needs healing too. Subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories every single week, right here on Mr. Charles Stories. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't the loudest, they're the realest.